Hey there everybody and welcome back to another Feral Reads My Little Pony fanfic. This is something I've been wanting to get back to for a while, and I do want to turn it into a more regular feature on my channel. And I've wanted to read another Loganberry serious fanfiction since I did Starlight Repeatedly Teleports into Custard. This is actually one I've been wanting to read for a while, again both for myself and for the channel, and as such I have to admit I did start reading this one on my own. From about halfway through, it becomes a blind reading. I stopped there when I realised just how great a direction it was going in, and I just wanted the emotions to feel real from there. I just hope I did it justice. I know that a reasonable Applejack voice is a big part for this story, so I'm hoping that it isn't too bad coming out of me. I know I slip a little too deep south on a few occasions, but I hope you can see through that to the story underneath. So without further ado, let's get to the story. The Book of Ended Lives by Loganberry. I'm Lars Count. For a while now I've been the keeper of the Book of Ended Lives here in Ponyville Town Hall, and it can be hard work, especially when Fluttershy visits the office. This afternoon though, it's Applejack. She's here to tell me about the Timberwolf she killed earlier, to start with. All around is barely controlled chaos. Tottering piles of papers, quills of every size, a rickety abacus held together with paste and tape, a colourful avalanche of paper clips. Just one spot is pristine, a perfect rectangle of neatness among the dust of years. I grunt a little as I light my horn and reach for the heavy ledger, guiding it down from its high shelf to the allotted space on the desk. I set the book down and my mind tenses. A Timberwolf? I say, raising brows but not eyes as I find the appropriate section. Just the one? There's a snort, the sound of a practical pony who has little patience for jokes. I decide not to tell her that my question was entirely serious. Just the one, echoes Applejack. The darn thing was a prowling and a growling right there below Apple Bloom's bedroom. Why, if I hadn't been there, my little sister could have... She catches herself and I raise a hoof. The name? I ask. Even with my eyes glued to the Book of Ended Lives, I can tell that Applejack is still rolling hers. Still, one thing this man knows is the importance of rules. Without the rules of the land, there would be no sweet apple acres and no apples to be bucked. It makes Applejack easier to deal with than some other ponies, at any rate. Realising the silence has not been broken, I look up. Applejack seems to take that as her cue to answer at last, though I don't know if I'd call it an answer. It was a pony-eating Timberwolf, Sugar Cube, she says, her voice calm and even, but there's precious little affection in the endearment. I don't go asking names and making all friendly-like with vermin coming after my kin. I do what needs to be done. I bite down hard on my tongue and select a suitable quill, making it dip in the inkwell built into the desk. In the deepest midnight blue I scratch the single word, unknown, in the appropriate space, working calmly and efficiently with the assurance that comes of long years of practice. There are 12 other entries on this page, but this one will be different. I don't know if Timberwolves even have names, but what else can I do? The farce continues as I move across the columns. Age, sex, place of origin, unknown, unknown, unknown. Sometimes, in that half-light of the soul that lies between sleep and wakefulness, I ponder whether Princess Celestia really knows what she's doing. She has ruled this land for centuries, and under her command ponykind has never lost its mastery of Equestria. Not even in the dark times 500 years ago, when the wild blizzards came and the wild windigos with them, when the Sun Princess ruled alone beneath the choking clouds from her castle of ice and sorrow. But does she really know how the mortal ponies who inhabit her domain live? And can she truly know what it means for them to die? Now we're into the nitty-gritty. Cause of death? She draws herself up, head raising and chest swelling. Her green eyes are clear and hard. I keep the quill poised. I booked it right in the face. I lower the quill to the desk. It lands with a harsh click. What? Applejack's eyes narrow. Her voice is low and lean and lethal. I booked it in the face. Worked mighty well, too. Are you sitting there safe and snug behind your desk in Town Hall and telling me I should have asked it for a nice chat by the fire and a mug of spice cider? That's not what I'm saying, Mom. I realised my error half a moment too late. Don't you ma'am me, Mr. Last Account. Ponies have names. If there was little warmth in her voice before, now it carries the blinding, piercing cold of the high Yakyakistan peaks. I'd have sooner put that thing straight on the fire and have done with it, than let its ashes warm a supper for Applebloom. It would have done more good there than it ever did in life. I'm only here because I promised Fluttershy. I try not to let my eyes betray me, I suspect not quite succeeding. I should have known she would be involved. My mind drifts back to the previous morning. She was crying, the way she always did.
A little Aussie Osprey. She got caught by a quarry eel and to pull herself away. I tried to help. I tried so hard, but I'm sorry. I had to tell you. For remembrance. Thank you.
She lays a gentle hoof on my own. I was crying too, the way I always did. Is that everyone? A quick, tear-stained nod. It was enough. There were no unknowns with Fluttershy, and no being, alive or dead, had more entries in the Book of Ended Lives than she. She waited, as always, until the day's records were complete and I was returning the book to its place. She smiled through her tears and thanked me again, then left to resume her calling. She would save lives and mend lives without number, but sometimes there were no more answers. And when despair burned so cold, she would do as kindness commanded. She would return. Always. How she bears it is beyond my ability to understand. Perhaps she doesn't know herself, but that is the lot of a bearer. Are you even listening to me? I shake myself back to the present, the tendrils of my memories relinquishing their hold only sluggishly. I apologise, Miss Applejack. I had allowed my mind to drift to other matters. Please go on. Applejack looks at me in silence for a moment. Well, I can't fault a pony for being honest, I guess. She reaches up and fidgets with the lip of her hat. Something seems to be bothering her. I'd ask, but half a lifetime in jobs like this tells me now isn't the time. Fortunately, she makes the decision for me. Truth be told, Mr. Account, my mind wasn't all here just then either. Her gaze is as direct and straightforward as always, but I fancy I can see the slightest cloudiness in those emerald irises. In the silence, through the fractionally opened window, I hear the town clock strike. I pick up the quill once more, but Applejack reaches out a hoof and knocks it from my aura. It clatters to the desk. It's terribly bad manners, but I'm not going to upbraid her for it. Not this pony, not now. I got something I ought to tell you. I reckon it's time. A sense of foreboding sweeps through me, though I can't quite think why. Me? Why me? Applejack looks at me appraisingly. She appears to come to a decision, sweeping her hat off to hold it in front of her, her golden mane flowing in what slight breeze there is. I've never seen her remove her hat in here before. I haul myself a little straighter. How long you been working in this office, Mr. Account? It's such an ordinary, everyday question that it strikes me like a jet of cold water in the face. I blink a few times, screwing my eyes up hard each time. 6, 7, 8 years, I say at last. I'd have to look it up now. The days can blend into one another sometimes. I know you were here when I moved up from the Philadelphia office. I was, she replies. 7 years and 63 days ago. That very first time I was standing here right by this door, and you were working right there at that desk. Ah. I drop my gaze and rest my forehoofs together on the desk. I know. I raise my eyes and my hoofs from the time-planed wood of the desk's surface. Applejack looks away for just a moment. If it were any other pony, I think she was having quite some trouble reining in her emotions. With her, well, I come to a decision. I know, I say again. A fire comes into Applejack's gaze, though she remains calm. She eyes me in silence. I feel as though the layers are being scorched from my body, on and on until she reaches my soul. She makes a decision of her own. No. I'm sorry? It's such a feeble response, but it's all I can manage. I have to force myself to meet Applejack's eyes. Do you have any family, Mr. Account? A shudder of ice courses through my body. I've always known this question would come. I've waited so long for this, rehearsed what I would do, what I would say, what she would say, told myself again and again that it was all part of the job, that when the time came I would take it in my stride. Lies, and she knows it. Not anymore, I say. What happened? It comes out so much like a challenge that I half rise from the seat before checking. Applejack stands impassively as I gather myself and settle back down, rubbing a hoof harshly across my brow. We were divorced, I say simply. We had no foals, after all, and we both agreed it was the best thing to do. It was time for us to move on. The flame in Applejack's eyes burns a harsher, grittier hue. And did you make an entry about that? No, the marriage records office is across the hall. I risk a tiny smile. It's a little noisier than this place. That ain't what I meant. I don't understand. I don't understand, I say. Applejack cocks her head slightly. You ever think about your... Wife. Oh, sure, I say, venturing another smile. We still send each other cards at Hearthswarming. Applejack shakes her head slightly. Nope. I'm sorry? She says, I don't mean once a year, doing it because every pony else is. I mean, when did you last think about her buying carrots at the market, or singing in the choir? When did you last think about her eating a daisy sandwich and complaining there's too much pepper? When did you last think about that mare living her life? I sigh and rub the back of my neck roughly with a hoof, saying nothing. You understand now? I do. You want me to go on? Yeah. I blink twice, hard. Yes, please do. Why did you come to the office alone that day? You were still very young then, after all. That's easy enough. Granny was grieving for her daughter and her son-in-law. She was in no condition to come along. I refrain from pointing out that Applejack was grieving too. Right now I might as well look her in the face. I search for something better to say, and I think I find it. Yes, you're right. Safe and warm at home. As soon as the words leave my mouth, I know I'm wrong. Applejack's look could melt granite. The calmness in her voice is worse. And sides, some pony had to be there for little Apple Bloom, and Granny's hearing had always been the best out of all of us. I made Big Macintosh stay home with her, 'cause some pony needed to keep an eye on her. Good thing too, else I wouldn't be here right now. I don't make the connection and simply wait for Applejack to continue. All I can hear is the irritated buzzing of a fly somewhere high up. I keep waiting. I came down here, she says at last, and talked to you. You'll remember every little detail about that, I reckon. I don't, but I have more sense than to say so. When I was done, I went to clean myself up a little. She places her hat flat on the desk, though she doesn't quite let go. And then I needed a drink, so I went to the restaurant, bought myself a couple of sarsaparillas. I needed those. She pauses again. I don't quite see why, but while I'm still wondering, she raps out a question. What did you do that day? I don't know the answer to that. After you'd gone home? After I'd left your office. It sounds like a correction. Well, I stutter. I was pretty shaken, of course. All the training in the world can't prepare a pony for something like that. The rest of the day was pretty straightforward, really. A few pets, all natural causes, and that was about it. Though one of them was a squirrel. Small-town Equestria was a whole new world to me. Applejack forces a thin smile. I acknowledge it with one of my own. Right. Fluttershy only moved down here a couple of years later. Squirrels? I didn't know the half of it. But what's all this leading up to, Miss Applejack? I'll tell you what I did that day, she says, her voice strained once more. I finished up my sarsaparillas, pulled myself together. Then I trotted back to Sweet Apple Acres, found my kinfolk, and saved a few lives. I stare at the mare standing in front of me, fidgeting with her hat again, and wonder if I heard her right. Then I focus fully on her eyes, and the uncertainty falls away. Timberwolves, of course, she says, as though there could never have been any doubt. 3 of the curs. They ain't stupid, I'll give them that. They knew Granny, Big Mac, and A.B. were vulnerable right then. All 3 of them upstairs and exhausted in that one room waiting for me to come back, and they plan to make the most of it. I spread my suddenly aching hooves on the desk, almost touching the brim of Applejack's hat. She glowers at me and I withdraw them a little. Some pony had left the kitchen window wide open. She thumps an iron-hard hoof down right where mine had been and unleashes a string of savage curses, every one of them aimed at herself. Visibly shaking now, she continues. Well, soon as I saw what was going on, I was leaping through that window like a jackrabbit. One of them was right on the other side. Lucky for me, I was all wound up and ready to go. She gives a mirthless chuckle. Less lucky for that thing, thank the earth. I search for a suitable reply. There is nothing. I reach out towards Applejack, change my mind midway and let my hooves fall back. She raises an eyebrow slightly. There's a touch of reproof in the gesture. The bits were all still clattering around when I heard a noise from upstairs. Couldn't be certain, but it sure sounded to me like A.B.'s voice. Well, I was up those stairs faster than a hog on wash day. Right when I got to the top, an awful screaming started up. I hate to admit it, but I kinda lost my senses just then. What I should have done was to have gotten myself prepared and gone in all alert like. What I did was turn myself around and buck that door off its hinges. There was another Timberwolf right behind it. She gives a tiny nod. Sometimes you gotta fight fire with fire, or wood with wood. That door took its head clean off, and when that happens to these monsters, the rest just falls apart. I thought it must be my lucky day. Applejack presses her hat into the desk so hard her hooves turn white. I stare for a moment, then force myself to look away, back at her face. Leastways, I did till I saw the third one standing there, a-slavering over Apple Bloom's crib as she cried and hollered for her mama, the mama who was never coming back. One of the precarious piles of papers slides to the floor, sheet after sheet swishing into a mess that's going to take hours to clean up. I don't move. I'm vaguely aware of the sounds of everyday business going on outside the door, but they might as well be 1,000 miles away. It's well past 5 now, but I'm not going to be leaving until this is over. I wonder what would happen if I did. If I told Applejack I needed to get home to my dinner. Probably she'd place her hat back on her head, give a flick of that golden mane and politely thank me for listening, then walk calmly out of the door. I wouldn't see her again. Big Mac and Granny were there too, throwing themselves at that thing again and again. At last Applejack's eyes dropped to the floor. There was blood on the two of them, and blood on the floor, blood on the crib. My mind races. They didn't. No. I was at the schoolhouse just a week ago. Apple Bloom was there that day, but poor Cheerilee. Some things they just can't train a teacher for. My mind went awful blank just then, and when that happens it's my muzzle that takes over. At least that's what Big Macintosh will tell you. Ha! Her short laugh is shocking. I drew myself up, real tall like, and hollered at the beast. Come and get me, you slobbering varmint! Like it was a fox or something. All at once, Applejack sags. I reach out a tentative hoof, and this time she grabs it, pressing it tight to the desk. She brings her face close to mine. There's a scent of hay and muck and manual labour, and apples, of course. Her eyes are steady and clear now, almost too much so. They're the eyes of a pony dancing on the edge of a knife. You know it was Winona's birthday last month? She asks, seemingly apropos of nothing. Sure, I say. Half of Ponyville was there, so they said in the Express. It was quite a party, even by Pinky's standards. She was 7, says Applejack. I struggle to see where this is going. I'm dreading another meaningful glare or charged gesture, but all I get is a single word. 7, she repeats. The pressure on my hoof increases. Mare's best friend, they say. They're right about that, but times are it's an awful curse on 'em. I'm sorry, I don't... I widen my eyes and then... Oh, Celestia. Applejack nods. Her name was Winnie. She was Winona's granny. I'm just staring at her now. I tell myself that this is no worse than some of the things that Fluttershy has told me over the years, but even in my head it sounds hollow. Just as that Timberwolf came for me, Winnie raced in, barking her head off. I don't know where she'd been, but she sure knew where she was going. Applejack drops her eyes for just a moment. She went right for the beast's eyes. I say nothing. She hears me, I'm certain. Then that thing's paw snapped around and... There were tiny beads of sweat on Applejack's brow. I never heard a noise like that before, but it weren't the last time. I heard it again and again those next few days. A light goes on outside. Another goes on in my head. And that's why... Applejack nods, more vigorously than I expect, and I have to fight the impulse to jerk back in my chair. She hadn't gone away. I start to wonder why she didn't make the report a little later, but I don't get far. I can still hear it now, she says, leaning a little towards me. Every single night. I force myself not to close my eyes. Instead, I shake my head very slightly. Applejack's expression flickers only momentarily, but it's enough. There's so much I want to ask, but her head snaps back and my chance is gone. And when the cur was done with Winnie, it went for Granny's head. She dodged just enough that it only knocked her out, thank the earth. But the crack of her head slamming down on the floor, truth is I hear that every night as well. I can't help myself. But Granny Smith's still alive? Granny's one tough cookie, even if her hearing ain't been so good since. Applejack purses her lips for a second. 3 out of 4 ain't bad, I guess. She swallows. But I knew right there that if I wasted time thinking about that, then I'd be going on the debit side of that ledger. Only now do I realise that my throat is parched, and the realisation makes me cough violently. Applejack pulls back a little, though she watches me all the while, honest concern in her expression. When I'm done, she carries on. Turning my back on every pony. On Winnie. That was the hardest thing I ever did. My brow furrows and I open my mouth, but Applejack cuts in before I can speak. I bucked it right in the face. There's silence, long moments of it, and I become aware of the dust motes dancing in the air. Then the clock outside chimes again and the spell is broken. Only now, as Applejack pulls away a little, do I notice the wiry sinews standing out on her lean neck. I honour my debts, Mr. Account. At last she places her hat back on her head. At last I see her blink again. And this debt ain't the kind that gets wiped out. I care for Mac and Granny and A.B. something fierce. Winona too, and that ain't never gonna change. They're my kinfolk, and there ain't nothing worth more to me than them. She turns to leave. Then as she pushes the door open, she twists her head to look back at me. No compromises, she says. I meet her gaze. You do? I don't want to finish the sentence. It's not my right. Perhaps it's just my imagination, but I fancy I see a faint respect in Applejack's expression. What has to be done? Now she smiles again, and this time it's the simple, friendly smile I've seen so many times before. You have a good evening now. She tips her hat and walks out of the room. The door swings shut behind her. I suddenly realise how hungry I am and how late it is, and how much my muscles ache. But I don't like to leave a job unfinished. Especially not this one. I capture the quill in my aura and prepare to give Winnie her due. Its point hovers a fraction of an inch above the paper. She hadn't gone away. I lift the quill for a moment and turn it in my magic, wondering about the bird it came from, considering its lost beauty. Then, solemnly, calmly, heavily, I set it back against the paper and scratch in the details. I turn the page, even though this one is not yet full, and thump the book closed. Getting to my hooves, I float the book quickly back to its home on the high shelf. For a few moments I contemplate the empty rectangle on my desk. I have some thinking to do tonight, and then perhaps an appointment with the mayor in the morning. Lives end, leaves turn, life flows. Tomorrow will be better. Or worse. Or neither, who can tell? But it will be tomorrow. Well, that story was quite difficult to read. Narrate, obviously, for all the right reasons. There are some stories out there that it's difficult to read because there's grammar and spelling issues which will pull you out of it, but in this case, the reason that it was difficult to do a narrative reading on this is because it was so intricate and nuanced, and the characters themselves, well, Applejack is pretty much spot on for a written character. Obviously, last account, it's the author's creation. All we can assume there is that is spot on because he was written for that role. He exists purely for that role. It's difficult because, as I say, the intricacy and the nuance has actually left me wondering if I did it justice. Did I put in too much emotion where it should have been guarded? Did I not put enough in when it should have been flowing freely? All I can say is, Loganberry, if I haven't got it right, please do let me know and I will reboot it. I will get it right because this story deserves a proper reading. I'm pretty sure it'll be impossible for me to do it proper justice, so the link is in the description. Go and give it a read yourself. Your own mind will do far better than I could as an interpretation. Now, writing in first-person perspective isn't the easiest thing to do, and first-person present tense is that much harder. You have to be so careful that you don't slip and draw the reader out of it with an accidental tense swap, which, from what I've heard, is all too easy to do when you're writing present tense. However, if you get it right, it does allow you to put a level of subtlety in that you just can't properly get with any other style of writing, and that did suit this perfectly. You may have noticed in my accent for last account, which I need to justify as being a British accent for two main reasons. One is because when I think of someone in a bureaucratic role, I don't know why, but the British accent just kind of seems to jump out to me. The quintessential posh British accent tries to jump out to me. Just don't know why, but it does. And the second is that, as that is the main body of the story, I'm sorry, it was just that much easier to stay in the character if I basically just gave him my accent. But yes, you may have noticed that at the beginning I was putting on a little bit of an extra poshness, a little bit extra to the character, and by the end of it I basically was just me, because I had been drawn into this. I was living this story, and quite honestly, I don't know how I got to the end of it without crying myself, because I did feel like Applejack was explaining these things to me, telling me about the tragedy that she has suffered, and just feeling like she's never really got over it because she's never really had anyone to explain it to. She's kept it all to herself, and feeling like I was the outlet for that really pulled me in and made me feel part of the story. I can only hope that I did it well enough that you felt the same yourself. You'll have to let me know down in the comments how I did, or if there is anywhere that you thought I could improve. But if you did like this story, please do go and read the rest of Loganberry's stories. They are linked in the description, as is this one. Again, I hope I did alright for my time back on the horse of narrating stories. Hopefully, as I say, this is going to become a more regular thing on this channel. Well, until next time everyone, thanks for listening. Bye bye.